Namaskar, Fundamentals of Physics video lecture series, my Earth talk, and the concluding part on kinematics in one dimension. In this talk, we will discuss free fall and other examples of uniform acceleration. The necessary theoretical framework we have already constructed, and we have defined a set of kinematic quantities like position, velocity as the first derivative of position, acceleration as the first derivative of velocity, jerk as the first derivative of acceleration, snap as the first derivative of jerk, crackle as the first derivative of snap, and pop as the first derivative of crackle. So we can move from position to the velocity to the acceleration to the jerk to the snap to the crackle and to the pop by differentiating the functions. And so if I know the position as a function of time, I can get the velocity, acceleration, jerk, snap, and crackle and pop as function of time by using the process of differentiation. And if I am given pop as a function of time, I can move upward. So from pop, by integration, I can obtain crackle. From a crackle, I can obtain snap. From snap, I can obtain jerk. From jerk, I can obtain acceleration. From acceleration, I can obtain velocity. And from velocity, I can obtain position. But since the process of integration involves a constant of integration, knowledge of the quantity obtained after the integration, at least at one instant of time, is very much essential for getting the expression of that particular quantity as a function of time. Which means to say that if I wish to obtain velocity by integrating acceleration, then I must know the velocity at one instant of time. And similarly, if I wish to get position as a function of time by integrating velocity as a function of time with respect to time, then I must know the position at least for one instant of time. So that is the working mathematical model we have developed so far for describing the one-dimensional motion of a particle. In the last talk, you may have noticed that I have derived the equation of motion for Newton, or called Newton's equation for uniform acceleration. But I have written all these equations in a scalar form. In fact, in case of one-dimensional vectors, we have this advantage, and which I have exploited, that a one-dimensional vector can be expressed by a signed number, because a one-dimensional vector can have only two directions. For example, either oriented in positive x direction or oriented in negative x direction. So that I can describe that the positive x direction by positive scalar numbers and negative x direction by negative scalar numbers. So the quantities like V, U, A, T and S, which were used in the Newton's equation in a scalar form, would carry sign, and their sign should be appropriately explained or understood in terms of this notion that plus sign means orientation towards the positive x direction and minus sign means orientation towards the negative x direction. So while interpreting those equations which I have given to you after derivation called Newton's equation for the case of uniform acceleration, remember that if initial velocity is positive, it means it is oriented towards the positive x direction, and if it is negative, it means it is oriented toward negative x direction. Now, one point I wish to emphasize, which I could not emphasize earlier in my previous talk, that we are using graphs, and from the graph we can obtain the differential coefficient by determining slope of the tangent. But the slope of the tangent can be determined also by using tangent theta, and where theta is the angle which it makes with the time axis in those cases for determining the velocity from xt curve, and similar notions I have discussed earlier. But there is one important point which one must remember, that this can only be employed when you choose that one unit on the x-axis, because these are called xy graphs. So there are two axes, x and y. For plotting a graph, you have to choose a scale. On x-axis, suppose we are plotting time, and suppose we say 1 centimeter equal to 1 second on x-axis, then I have to choose 1 centimeter on y-axis also as 1 meter, the SI unit. So if it is distance time graph, position time graph, that can work. If it is velocity time graph, I would have to choose 1 centimeter equals to 1 centimeter, 1 meter per second on the velocity axis. And similarly for acceleration time graph, 1 meter per second square. But if I choose this particular scale identical, means 1 centimeter on each x and y axes are equal to, or 2 centimeter are equal to 1 unique length of SI unit. If I make a difference, then the same graph here is shown here, where I have chosen different x scale, and then I find that the angle subtended, if I measure from the graph, then would be different. So if you want to make measurement of tan theta by measuring theta, due care must be taken in drawing this graph, that suppose 1 unit on x-axis is corresponds to 1 SI unit of the quantity being plotted, then on the y-axis also 1 unit shall corresponds to 1 SI unit of that quantity, because the quantities which are being plotted on x and y axis may have different dimensions and different unit. More care should be taken in this calculations. And if you change the scale on the x-axis and suppose you say 2 centimeter equals to 1 second on x time axis, then you should also say 2 centimeter equal to 1 meter on y-axis accordingly. So the scale should be appropriately chosen, otherwise determination of theta by plotting the graph will not be applicable. It would communicate in any case some information of how the quantity is varying, which is plotted on the y-axis is depending on the quantity which is plotted on the x-axis. At the same time, it is here again to remind you that the SI unit system we are following, and the SI unit for angle is radian. So even if not mentioned in my talks in this lecture or subsequent lecture, the angle in general means angle expressed in radian, and wherever it will be expressed in degree etc., it would be specifically mentioned. Remember, 1 radian is defined as the angle which 1 meter arc subtends at the center when the radius of the circle is 1 meter. So if the radius of a circle is 1 meter and if you choose a 1 meter arc, then 1 meter arc subtends an angle 1 radian on the center of the circle whose radius is 1. So that is the definition, and we already know that pi radian is equals to 180 degree. So 1 radian works out to be nearly 57.3 degree. In this slide I have also given the expression which is called trigonometric series expansion of trigonometric function, using Taylor series. The expansions are given for sin x, cos x and tan x, but these expansion relations are also valid only when you express the x or theta, whatever is involved, in the radian unit. So sin x is equals to x minus x cube by factorial 3 plus x pi by factorial 5 plus minus and so on. It's an infinite series. So this is applicable only when x is in radian, and so is for the expression for cosine and for the expression for tangent given here. However, the expression for tangent given here is for the magnitude of x less than 90 degree or pi by 2 radian. So remember that in some cases I would be using small angle approximation. Based on this series expansion, you can understand that if x is very small, then in comparison to x, the x cube by factorial 3 and x pi by factorial 5 and higher order terms can be ignored, and so we can say sin x is nearly equal to x when x is very small. And similarly, we can say that in comparison to 1, the x square by factorial 2, x4 by factorial 4 and other terms can be ignored, and cos x is nearly equal to 1. And similar extension again for tan x is nearly equal to x, or this thing I can say in terms of theta also, that sin theta is nearly theta, cos theta is nearly 1 and tan theta is nearly theta, but this kind of approximation is valid only for small angles. In previous talk we have used, for example, the angle for tan inverse 0.03. 0.03 is a small number, and therefore tan inverse of 0.03 was equal to 0.03. But this is not true for all arguments of x. Any argument of x you choose which is greater and for which the higher orders cannot be ignored, it cannot be ignored. Remember. So sin x is nearly x, cos x is nearly 1, tan x is nearly x only for very, very small angles, and that too when measured in radian. It is not applicable for angles measured in degree or any other unit. Now to move forward, given the acceleration time curve, I have earlier explained that from acceleration time curve by drawing tangent and determining slope of the tangent we can find jerk. But now I am trying to explain that how the process of integration helps us in knowing from the acceleration time curve the change in velocity. So here a graph of acceleration time is shown, and this line ordinate t equals to ti, the initial time, and t equals to tf, the final time. If the due care in selecting the units as explained earlier in the beginning of today's talk is taken care of, then you can find area under this curve and between the ordinates and the time axis. The area under the curve and time axis, two boundaries, and the ordinate t equals to ti and tf boundaries. So this yellow shaded area, yellow colored area which is shown in this picture, that will be equal to the definite integration of a t dt from ti to tf, and which means it would be equal to change in velocity. So given acceleration time curve, I can determine change in velocity by determining this area through graphical method. So it is area under the curve and about t-axis and between the ordinates t equals to ti and t equals to tf. The same approach I can use for determining displacement from velocity time curve. So displacement in interval ti to tf will be equal to the area under the vt curve and time axis, and within the ordinates t equals to ti and t equals to tf, again shown here by yellow color. So this yellow colored area would be giving me the displacement in the time interval ti to tf. So the vt curve can be used to determine the displacement also in this manner. But as pointed out earlier, that due care must be taken if you determine the area by reading it on graph, and then the scale should be appropriately chosen as explained in the beginning of the talk today. So we conclude from this that by the graphs we can arrive at both the things. Suppose velocity time graph is given, then at any point by drawing the tangent and determining the slope of the tangent, I can determine acceleration, and I can also determine from the velocity time curve the displacement in any time interval. So the graphical approach or plots if are given of xt or vt or at or any other kinematic quantities that help us in determining other kinematic quantities in this manner. Now so far we have discussed, in order to discuss the kinematics of particle in one-dimensional space and one-dimensional time, the particle which is supposed to have an intrinsic characteristics called mass and which is located at a point because it has a point size and it is indivisible and structureless, and we have defined a set of extrinsic quantities called position, velocity, acceleration, jerk, snap, crackle, pop, etc. And we have noted that these quantities are defined in relation to a frame of reference, and these are relative quantities and these are extrinsic quantities, and if you change the frame of reference, the description of these quantities will also change. And so far we have discussed the state of rest, the state of uniform motion and the uniform acceleration, also uniform jerk. In the last talk, I have given you a problem of free fall of an object from height h if a free fall occurs, and this problem will be now discussed. But what we are doing, we are assuming that during the fall motion, the acceleration remains constant, and that is given by g, and it is equivalent to acceleration due to gravity of earth. and which has a constant value of 9.8 meter per second square, or which can be approximately taken as 10 meter per second square. So that value we will be using. But later we will consider various other effects and where corrections would be required. In real cases, the buoyancy due to air, because whenever an object has a certain size and it will be experiencing a force of buoyancy due to air, it would be also experiencing during the fall the viscous force due to air, and there may be wind flow involved. There may be effect of non-inertial frame because Earth is rotating on its own axis and Earth is also rotating around the Sun, and so on. So non-inertiality effects would also be considered later in discussions in coming lectures whenever these topics will be taken up. And if you involve GTR, then the GTR is not applicable right now, but GTR corrections are also important, however very small in case of free fall and phenomenon like that. The variation of acceleration due to gravity, because we are assuming that the gravity for height which is being considered is not significantly varying and gravity acceleration due to gravity is constant, but the fact is that acceleration due to gravity of Earth depends upon the altitude. The variation is very insignificant here because in comparison to the radius of the Earth, the heights which are being considered are only a few meters, and the radius of the Earth is around about of the order of 6,400 kilometers. So the h is very small in comparison to the radius of the Earth. And when we take the dependence on the altitude, it is taken from the distance measured from the center of the Earth. So the altitude effects can be ignored. There are other phenomena, other questions which may also come up on your mind, that suppose an object is falling freely on the Earth, what is the effect on it of the pull by sun or moon or by any other planet or by any other cosmic object in our cosmos. And those things, whenever appropriate, we will be discussing. We will be discussing these in subsequent lectures whenever need arise, and I think it is important. But right now we are assuming all those things which are mentioned here, from buoyancy to the effect of sun, etc., we are ignoring, and we are assuming that in subsequent discussion, wherever the acceleration due to gravity will be appearing for till not clarified, will be considered as constant. So throughout the motion, the acceleration is constant. It is value is equal to acceleration due to gravity, and it is pointing vertically downwards. And the vertical direction is the direction which points toward the center of Earth, and it is the direction in which the gravitational pull of Earth acts. And so the acceleration due to gravity is acting vertically downward, that we have assumed, and its constant value we have assumed. So the technique which we have learned in the last talk to deal with the uniform acceleration, we will be employing to discuss this example and then subsequent modification of this example. So let us describe this particular example. So we choose the direction vertical as the y-axis, and so vertical upward as the y-axis and vertical downward as the minus y-axis. So in the vertical upward direction, we would be choosing the plus j unit vector. In the vertical downward direction, we will be choosing minus j the vector. So acceleration due to gravity will be given by a as a function of t is minus gj. Minus sign is chosen because it is pointing vertically downward. J is the unit vector in the vertical upward direction, and here we find that the g is constant, so acceleration due to gravity or acceleration in this problem is constant. But let me make the frame of reference. So what we do, we choose the foot of the perpendicular. When an object falls from height h, it falls. So from height h, it falls to the ground. Then from, say, this height h, it begins and it falls to the ground. At the ground where it falls or it hits the ground, at that point I am taking the origin. So my initial position is at height h above it, and therefore the y is 0 at the ground, but y is hj at time t equal to 0. It is the value of the y is hj. Only when it will hit the ground, which means at time t equal to tf, what value will become 0. So with this notion, now I can solve the problem with the chosen, because I have chosen the origin, also a position on the ground, at the foot of the perpendicular from the point from where it is released or where it hits the ground, and I also choose the origin of time from the time when it is released. The object is released and then the free fall begins. At that time, object is not given any pull or push, and so the initial speed of the object at time t equal to 0 is 0. With this assumption, now I can solve the problem. By using this expression of acceleration, I can integrate acceleration and obtain the velocity. So on integration of the acceleration, the velocity as the function of time is given by integration of acceleration as the function of time with respect to time, and I substitute minus gj here, and since minus g is constant, so it's out, and j unit integration of dt is t, so I get minus dtj plus a constant of integration c1. As told you earlier that all process of integration, indefinite integration, involve a constant of integration. Now this constant of integration labeled c1 by me, I have to determine, so I can determine it by using this equation, that at time t equal to 0, the object was released and the initial speed was 0. So v at t equals to 0 turns out to be c1 from here is taken as 0, which means c1 is 0. And if c1 is 0, hence we have the final expression of velocity as a function of time. V of t is given by minus gtj, and which means the velocity would also be pointing out vertically downward all the time during the course of journey till it hits the ground. The velocity will be pointing towards vertical downward direction in the direction of acceleration. And since acceleration and velocity are having same directions, the velocity will definitely be increasing in magnitude as the object falls down. Next, we can now do further integration of velocity as a function of time with respect to time and obtain the function for position. So y as a function of time is integration of v as a function of time dt, and so I make a substitution for v here, and then I know that integration of t dt is t square by 2, so I get minus half g t square j plus c2, another constant of integration. Each time you do the integration, constant of integration will appear. So this constant of integration I can determine by knowing the value of y, which was at time t equal to 0, it was at height h, so the value of y coordinate was h, or y vector was equal to hj. So I make use of it, that at t equal to 0, from this expression I get c2, but at c2 therefore must be equal to hj, and therefore I substitute for c2 the hj, and I have this final expression which can be written as within bracket h minus half gt square times the unit vector j. And so the height, which was initially h, would keep on decreasing because as time passes, and it would be given by h minus half gt square at any instant t. But I am interested in that instant when the height becomes 0 and it hits the ground. So when it hits the ground, y becomes 0, so h minus half g tf square, that particular time when it hits the ground, so h minus half g tf square should be equals to 0, and that gives me the expression for tf, time of flight, and that expression is that the time of flight tf is under root of 2h by g. And thus I note that time of flight is not proportional to the height. Time of flight is proportional to the square root of height. So if I double the height, then the time of flight would be only root 2 times. But if I make it 4 times, then the time of flight will become 2 times. And similar conclusions can be made. So g is constant. So you can't consider variation of g here because we are assuming g to be constant, and same. But tf depends upon h, it is proportional to the square root of h. Next is that with what velocity it will hit the ground. That is also of my interest. So I determine v at time t equal to tf. You substitute the formula of v, the t by tf. And when I write tf equal to under root 2h by g and simplify it, then I get that the final velocity, which means here the velocity with which it hits the ground, definitely it is pointing in downward direction, it is hitting the ground in downward direction with this velocity under root 2gh. in the magnitude and the direction vertically downward. Now to get numerical filling with the numbers, if suppose height I take as 10 meter and g as 10 meter per second square, then from this formula of time of flight which I have derived, I get time of flight to be equal to root 2, which means 1.4 second. And if I used the value of time of flight and use the expression for velocity at time t equal to tf, that this is the expression which I have obtained, and in this if I substitute the value of h and g, then I get 14 meter per second as the value of velocity, which I, if wish, I can convert it by multiplying by 3.6. A meter per second can be converted into kilometer per hour. Kilometer per hour, because you generally have an understanding of the kilometer per hour, because when you ride in a car or drive a car, then the speed of car is generally specified in kilometer per hour. And since you have experienced journeys, so you have an experience of understanding the velocity in kilometer per hour. So that's why I have expressed it. But in SI unit system, our answer will be that V in this particular example, when it hits the ground, the velocity, the magnitude turns out to be 14 meter per second inverse is the magnitude. The direction is J, vertical downward direction. Now another question I wish to consider. So after completing the free fall, that instead of free fall, suppose from the ground if I project something, throw something vertically upward, an arrow, an apple, a stone, anything I can project vertically upward. So I will throw something at time t equal to 0 from this point, which is I calling origin. So from origin at t equals to 0, throwing some object vertically upward with some speed u, and that speed is u. So at time t equal to 0, the speed is u and the velocity is uj. So we choose the same concept, direction concept, that the vertical upward direction will be called plus j, vertical downward as a minus j. I impart a vertical upward velocity of magnitude u in the vertical upward direction at time t equal to 0. From time t equal to 0, at time t equal to 0, it would be projected from r equal to 0. Since you have observed such phenomenon, when you throw something vertically upward, it moves in vertical upward direction, it attains a maximum height and then it falls down. So we are interested in knowing in what time it will attain the maximum height. What will be the value of maximum height it will attain? Suppose given the acceleration due to gravity g, which is acting vertically downward, given the initial velocity, I am interested in knowing what time it will take in attaining maximum height, what maximum height it will attain, and I am also interested in knowing what will be the total time of flight, because once it will move vertically upward, its velocity will keep on decreasing, because velocity initially projected in positive y direction and the acceleration is acting in negative y direction. So the magnitude of the velocity will keep on decreasing. At the height, maximum height, its velocity will be 0. That's why it's not moving further, and then it starts falling down under the acceleration and then it hits the ground. So the time of flight, the total generation, the total time of flight means from the projection attaining maximum height at Tm and then falling down. So from projection attaining maximum height at Tm and then falling down, the total time duration is say Tf, time of flight. So I am also interested in knowing that time of flight. And so given acceleration, again the same technique we will do, but the constant of integrations involved may have now different values because we have changed the problem. So what happens? So I write again velocity as an integration of at dt, the same formula for acceleration, I get minus gtj plus c1. But now I know that at time t equal to 0, velocity which is equal to c1 must be equal to uj, because I have given initial velocity to it. In the previous problem it was 0, but in this problem it is not 0, it is equal to uj. And so my formula for the velocity becomes u minus jt times j. So velocity is in upward direction and it would be decreasing with time initially because u minus gt, and at some time it will become 0 and then it would be again increasing in magnitude but having opposite direction because gt then will dominate the u. So till gt becomes equal to u, it will be decreasing, and when gt becomes greater than u in magnitude, then it would be increasing in magnitude, but the direction would also change, and that is what we observe. A stone first moves upward and then it falls downwards. And so I have to find before that the expression for the y. So I integrate the velocity, so I integrate this and I get an expression. Because of u, I have a term called ut. The minus half gt square is very similar to the previous case, but in previous case there was no u, so you were not having any term like ut, but here we have ut minus half gt square plus a constant of integration. Now this constant of integration would be determined by using the initial condition at time t equal to 0, since I have assumed that the position was at origin. In earlier case, at time t equal to 0, position was at vertical height h. So in the earlier case, the c2 was not 0, but in this case c2 is 0 because y at t equals to 0. It turns out that this factor bracket becomes 0, so y at t equals to 0 is c2, and I assume that y at t equals to 0 is taken as the origin is taken at t equals to 0. So y at t equals to 0 is 0, and so I have c2 equals to 0, and when I put c2 equals to 0, I get that this relationship that y as a function of time is given by ut minus half gt square. And as mentioned earlier also, that once you know y as a function of time, you know the complete motion, because now you can determine where the particle would be at each instant of time of your interest. But we are interested in finding that time in which it will attain the maximum height. So at t equals to tm, the velocity will become 0, and up to that time the velocity which was initially u, and it decreases and it becomes 0 at t equals to tm. So I put it here, u minus gtm equals to 0. That gives me a very simple formula that time taken in attaining maximum height is equal to u divided by g. And so what will be the maximum height? The height at this particular time. So y at this particular time I can calculate from this relationship utm minus half gtm square, and which turns out to be u by g minus half g u square by g square, and which turns out to be u square by 2g. So I get that the hm will be equal to u square by 2g. So at time u by g, it will be at maximum height, which from the ground will be equal to u square by 2g. Now I am also interested in knowing the entire time of flight. So when it hit back the ground, y again becomes 0. Initially also y was 0. So this quantity will be 0. And one solution is t equals to 0, which was initially it. And the other solution gives you that time of flight is 2u by g. And so 2u by g is the time of flight, and it is the double of time taken in attaining maximum height. So if you project something from the ground, then you know that for half of the time it would move vertically upwards, and for the remaining half of the time it will move vertically downwards. If in any case you observe that the two times are different, the time for taking rise and time for falling, then it may be because of the fact that the acceleration due to gravity is not the only thing involved in the motion, and there may be viscous drag forces and other forces playing the role. Otherwise, in this ideal situation, when acceleration due to gravity is the only cause and that is constant and acting vertically downward, we can say that time taken in attaining height, so time of ascent and time of descent, which is tf minus tm, both are same and equal to u by g. So time of ascent is u by g, time of descent is also u by g, and total time of flight is 2u by g. Now in this, to have certain numbers, if you put u equals to 10 and g equal to 10 meter per second, u as 10 meter per second and g is 10 meter per second square, then you get the time taken in attaining maximum height to be 1 second, time of flight to be 2 seconds, and maximum height to be 5 meter. Very simple calculation by substitution which you can verify. But if you double the u, keeping the g same, g will be same, and so if you double the value of projection, then what you know that time taken in attaining maximum height is 2 seconds, time of flight is 4 seconds, and the maximum height attained is 20 meters. So maximum height attained since depends upon u square, so when you double the speed, the maximum height becomes 4 times, as it is proportional to square of projection speed. That relationship we can learn from it, and we can solve numerical problems for vertical upward projection from ground from the expression derived here in this presentation. Another example is, suppose I am not projecting from the ground, but I am projecting from that point which is at height h. So from height h I am projecting with some vertical speed upward. Earlier from height h, in the very first case I have released it, so initial speed was 0. But I am saying now I am making a projection from height h in upward direction, and in upward direction the velocity is given by uj at time t equal to 0. So u at time t equals to 0, u is uj, and the position is at hj. Origin again I am choosing for the symmetry the same, the where it will ultimately fall. So the foot of the perpendicular from that particular point from where it has been projected on the ground, there I am choosing the origin. So the y coordinate of the point of projection is h, and at the time of projection the speed is u, but it is pointed vertically upward direction. So the problem remains same, but now you know that you are already at height h, the particle will gain more height and it will attain some height, say hm from the ground, and then it will fall down and it will hit the ground. So that motion we wish to understand by solving the problem. The acceleration remains same, so we start with the same thing, integrating acceleration, you get same expression, but here the c1, because initially at t equals to 0 velocity is c1, so you get c1 equals to uj, and you get the formula u minus gtj, which is very similar to the formula which you got for the vertical upward projection from the ground. But the difference arises when you integrate it further with y. Then since the integration of u minus gt will give you ut minus half gt square, plus there is a constant of integration. But now since projection is not from y equal to 0, it is from y equal to h. So the constant of integration c2 will not be 0 but will be hj. And so the value of y is different than the previous example, and it is h plus ut minus half gt square. So in the free fall the y was minus half gt square, in vertical upward projection from the ground it was ut minus half gt square, and in this vertical projection from the height h it is h plus ut minus half gt square. So with these examples you are learning how when we change the initial conditions of the problem, it gets modified and the expressions get modified. And now we continue our discussion and we determine Tm, the time taken in attaining the maximum height. The same logic that at time t equal to Tm, the velocity will become 0. So u minus jtm equals to 0, Tm equals to u by j. The same formula I am getting which I had for the vertical upward projection from the ground. But the formula of maximum height will be different definitely, because the expression of y is different, and so the height at the time t equal to Tm is given by the value of y at t equal to Tm, and that turns out to be, by using this formula, we can do the calculation by substituting Tm equal to u by g, and we get h plus u square by tg. So initially it was at height h and it has gained the same height u square by 2g again here, but the total height from the ground, the maximum height, is equals to h plus u square by 2g. Now to compute the time of flight, same logic would be used again. That time of flight it would hit the ground and y will again become 0. So I put this particular quantity y and makes it 0. Remember that at t equals to 0, y is not 0. T equal to 0, y is h. But now I use this, and so I have this equation h plus utf minus half gtf square equals to 0. This is a quadratic equation in tf which is 0. And therefore you need to know the roots of the quadratic equation. and that I assume that you understand the mathematics of quadratic equation and you are familiar of how to determine the roots of a quadratic equation. If a quadratic equation is ax square plus bx plus c equal to 0, then we know that root x is given by x equals to minus b plus minus under the square root of the within bracket b square minus 4ac, and the whole thing divided by 2a. So here a is minus half g, you can say in a sense, or you can convert it into the equation like this, that half gtf square minus utf minus h equals to 0. So a is equals to half g, b equals to minus u, and c equals to minus h. And by using this, now you get the value of time of flight minus b, which is u, plus minus b square, which is u square, and minus 4ac, which becomes 2gh, and 2a, which becomes g. So you have time of flight given by this. There are two routes possible in case of quadratic. Here you find that this quantity in the square root u square plus 2gh, because h is positive, g is positive, so this quantity u square plus 2gh is greater than u square, and since it is greater than u square, its square root will be greater than u. So in the numerator you have u plus minus a quantity greater than u. When you take the plus sign, the time of flight would be positive, but when you take the minus sign, then the time of flight will become negative, because the minus negative term is bigger than the positive term u, and so that time of flight will turns out to be negative. Since we are projecting at time t equal to 0, this negative time of flight is not realizable. So what I say, that mathematically there are two roots, but physically there is only one root, and that root is that u plus under root u square plus 2gh by g, and this is the root which will be time of flight expression which I should use. Now to give you again a numerical understanding, we get the numerical understanding by taking, say, the u equals to, here u is missing, but u equals to 10 meter per second, h equals to 10 meter, and g equals to 10 meter per second square. Then what you get, that the time of flight is 1 second. Sorry, time in taken in attaining maximum height is very similar to the previous problem, is 1 second, but time of flight is different because of this term, and it is nearly 2.7 seconds. And the maximum height, because initially it was at 10 meters, so 10 plus 5 is 15 meter. So it raises itself to 15 meter, and in this case time of ascent and time of descent will be different. Time of ascent is 1 second, time of descent is 2.7 minus 1, so 1.7 second. Because we are projecting from height h, it will take less time in ascent journey and more time, because it had to fall that maximum height from maximum height to the ground, which is, so the h fall is again required. So you understand that time of flight is different than the previous case, and we find that the time of ascent and time of descent are also different in this case. But if you double u, then the h plus u square by 2g, the u square by 2g will get doubled, and so this particular quantity will become 4 times, and so you have the maximum height attained is 30 meter, and in the previous case it was 10 plus 5 15 meter. Now 10 remains same, but 4 times, so 20, so it becomes 30 meter. The time of flight is becomes 4.4 second, and it is not double of it because of this relationship of u square plus 2gh. You find that in such motion, when you make vertical upward projection from height h, on doubling the u, you don't get double time of flight. Whereas in vertical upward projection from ground, doubling the speed, you get the double the time of flight. And so these things we can discover and we can make note of it. There can be one more example, that when I am at height h, instead of doing it, I throw it vertically downwards. So I give an initial velocity in downward direction. And so that is described here, that at time t equal to 0 from the height hj, it is given a minus velocity minus u. So the entire journey will be descent only. There is no ascent. It would not rise because I am giving an initial speed in the direction vertical downward. I am giving an initial velocity in the direction vertically downward. So all the time it would be falling down. And the problem again that we have started from the height h. So same thing we should do. Integrate velocity, integrate acceleration, find the velocity, and we get this expression of minus gtj plus c1. But what is c1? C1 is minus uj. Here there is a typos, so minus uj, I have correctly taken care of it, and so here typos, minus sign is missing, so put a minus sign here. Okay, I have just noticed that c1 is minus uj, and therefore minus uj minus gtj. So the expression which was earlier u minus gtj becomes minus u minus gtj, because u I have assumed to be a positive number, and minus sign is indicating that velocity is in downward direction. So the total value is also negative and it is in downward direction, but it is greater than u. So you throw it with certain initial speed u downward, but the initial speed, say the speed during the journey will be greater than u in magnitude, and then it will hit the ground. But to find the position as a function of time, you have to integrate the velocity, and you have to find the constant of integration, and constant of integration, since at time t equals to 0, like the previous example, turns out to be same hj, and you have therefore the expression, and which is h minus ut minus half gt square, because of change in the sign of u, the initial velocity. Here again the minus sign is appearing, again reminding you that u is taken as positive and minus u has been used in indicating the negative direction of the velocity at the time of projection. So what we get this relationship, which is again we can determine, because there is no question of Tm or Hm, we can determine time of flight, and the time of flight would be determined by using this expression that y at t equals to Tf is 0, and so you write again a quadratic equation and you get two roots. The negative root I have not written, because when you have minus sign here, that would become a negative time, and since at time t equal to 0 it was projected, so negative times does not make any physical realizable meaning, and therefore mathematically there are two solutions for time of flight, physically there is only one solution for time of flight, which we have noted. So far we have considered several cases. From height h I have considered three cases: free fall, vertical upward projection, and vertical downward projection. That I have considered from height h. So these all this thing. And I am now using the word speed, and I have also used speed in today's lecture. What is instantaneous speed? Or speed generally means instantaneous speed, and instantaneous speed is the magnitude or modulus of the velocity. That will be referred as instantaneous speed in our discussion. So if you specify direction separately, then you can say that the projection speed is u, vertically upward projection speed u, but vertical downward projection, here the projection speed is 0, initial speed. So these three cases we have considered, and we have also considered the upward projection from the ground when the height was 0, and these three cases when height was h, that we have considered. But remember that the instantaneous speed is magnitude of instantaneous velocity, but instantaneous average speed, sorry, not instantaneous, average speed is not magnitude of the average velocity. Average speed in the literature has been defined in a different manner. Average speed is defined in terms of distance traversed by a particle in the time interval, and distance traversed is a different quantity than the displacement, because it can oscillate, as we have seen in case of the sine graph, or otherwise also in many examples. So it can change the direction. So the displacement depends only upon the final and initial position, and it would always be in magnitude less than the magnitude of distance traversed, or at the best equal to it. But distance traversed is, in other words, either greater in the magnitude of displacement or equal to it. So the average speed is defined as distance traversed upon the time interval, and it's a different notion. Average speed I am not defining as the magnitude of average velocity, and I have pointed it out earlier also. Definitions are given by us. Once we accept definition, the community accepts, we have to take that into account and understand it. So two more terms, average and instantaneous speed, also I have introduced and are useful in understanding one-dimensional motion of a particle. Now a few more numerical questions based on the Newtonian equations derived in the last lecture I wish to take up. So these will give you the these are taken only as an examples and to make you feel comfortable that you can solve such problems by using the equations which were derived in the last talk, the 5 equations. Suppose the question is, if a car covers 50 meter in 8 seconds under uniform retardation. Now retardation, I am introducing a term. Acceleration sometimes is referred as retardation, especially when acceleration is pointing in direction opposite to the velocity and therefore the magnitude of velocity is decreasing with time. So retardation to a speed of 3 meter per second, which means the final speed is 3 meter per second. The distance covered is 50 meters and time is 6 seconds. So S is 50 meter, T is 8 seconds and V is 3 meter. In the first part it is asked initial speed. So as T and V are given, initial speed U is asked, acceleration is missing. So based on the acceleration missing, I choose the appropriate equation out of the 5. This is the equation which I can make now. For determining U, I have to rearrange the terms. So U equals to 2S by T minus V. I substitute the values of S, T and V given to me and I get the answer that the initial speed in this case will be 9.5 meter per second and which that in 8 seconds gets reduced to 3 meter per second and covers an 50 meter. But ignoring this first part, if I want to directly solve the second part, retardation, then I have S, T and V, acceleration is asked and initial speed is missing. So I would choose the corresponding equation where U doesn't appear, S equals to Vt minus half at square to find acceleration. Acceleration will be given by 2 Vt minus S divided by T square. I substitute the value of Vt and S given to me in this question and then I get that the value of acceleration turns out to be minus 52 by 64 meter per second square or nearly equal to minus 0.81 meter per second square. So you know that by using the two equations I could solve this numerical problem very easily. Another example, suppose if a racer accelerates his car in a race at constant acceleration 8 meter per second square from rest to cover 500 meter rest. So initially was at rest, so initial speed is 0, acceleration is given 8 meter per second square and so this is again a typos here, acceleration is not 8 seconds, it is 8 meter per second square as mentioned here. So make a correction here and covers 500 meter rest, so S is 500 meter and the initial velocity is 0. Some typos may occur in my presentations which I generally point it out because I have to finish the PowerPoint slide and once PowerPoint slide are roughly ready, I just rush to making the video lecture. So under the time pressure which I am following, some typos may occur. So kindly pardon me for that and I have pointed it out here. Instead of S, you should have meter per second square. And so what is given here, S, A and U are given. What is asked, time T is asked. What is missing, V is missing. So choose the appropriate equation in which V is missing. This is the equation. Now find T since U is 0. So this equation simply read as equals to half at square. And so T equals to 2S by A under the root. And substitute the value and you get the answer that within 15 seconds he will complete the particular race chosen. The numbers are not specifically maybe from any real life examples but are just given for getting an experience of doing and solving numerical questions. One more question related to the same uniform acceleration. An arrow is shot upward and then it moves downward, hits the ground and gets embedded in the ground. So what is given, then when it strikes the ground, the speed is 80 meter per second and we assume that ground provides the constant retardation and the acceleration is constant, and because of the retardation of the ground or the sand, the arrow penetrates into the ground up to distance of 0.2 meter. Then you have to find that time taken in stopping and as well as the retardation which was used. So what is given? S is given 0.2 meter in the ground, U is given initial speed 80 meter per second, and when it will stop, the velocity, the final velocity will become 0. So as V are given, and if A is to be determined, use this equation in which T is missing. So V square equals to U square plus 2S, that gives you A equals to V square minus U square by 2S. Substitute the values of V, which is 0, U which is 80, so 6400 square of it, and S is 0.2, so 2 into 0.2, and simplify, do the calculation, you get that this is the acceleration value minus 1.6 into 10 to the power 4, retardation value because minus sign that it is opposing. And now to find the time, because S, U and V are given and time is asked, acceleration is missing, so you get that particular expression again and make the substitutions and find the time value. And as you do, the time t equals to 2s upon v plus u, you get 0.4 upon 80 and you get 5 millisecond as the answer. That's the interesting example, that something when we drop sometimes in sand, then it gets penetrated and penetrates inside the sand, and how much it penetrates depends upon what is the impact velocity and the retardation offered by the sand or the ground. So very interesting question. Next question is not based on the previous Newton's equation of motion, but what we have discussed in today's talk. With what speed must a ball be thrown vertically up in order to rise to a maximum height of 67.8 meter? Suppose I intend to throw something vertically upward with this idea that it will move, at least it will attain a maximum height of 67.8 meter. So initially I would give some u so that it can attain 67.8 meter. So what is that maximum height, 67.8? What u I require and how long it will be in the air. So the expression we already have, hm equals to u square by 2g, hm is given to you, g is given, acceleration due to gravity 9.8 meter per second square. Sometimes it is not given in the question, but if the question is involving gravity, you can take it as granted, and so g equals to 9.8, hm is given, so I can determine u by using this formula obtained from this relationship, and I find that the initial speed to be given is 36.4 meter per second. Then once I know the initial speed, I also know the time of flight by the simple formula 2u by g, and that turns out to be 7.43 seconds. Now what is important lesson also you can learn from it, that it doesn't depend upon who is throwing. Anyone throwing, any machine or human being, the initial speed, if you just consider, ignore all other things and acceleration due to gravity playing a role, then if you want to throw something up to a particular height, everybody would have requirement of projection with same initial speed. So for a particular height, there is a particular specific initial speed from the ground and with which it should be projected so that it can attain that height, and it doesn't depend upon who, the man or the machine or whatsoever. And similarly, the time of flight also, you don't need to mention anything like that, that if a certain object is attained a particular maximum height 67.8 meter, it will involve a time of flight. If this motion is due to projection from initial time t equal to 0 with some initial speed, it has attained the height 67.8 meter, then the time of flight would be 2u by g, which means 7.43 seconds definitely. So these answers do not depend upon the person or the machine employed in throwing, but we find that in kinematical, if we consider this problem, then we find that neither the mass of the particle is important, but we can determine these things and which we can measure in experiments. So many of the cases which key of uniform acceleration, approximately we find that when we make measurement, then the measurement agrees with the kind of the kinematical analysis which we have done so far, and that boosts our confidence in this kinematical analysis and to generalize it further and then to develop the dynamics and to understand it in a much better perspective. So in the next talk, because I have concluded the kinematics in one dimension in this talk, more can also be said, and you can do large number of numericals, and numerical questions can be designed in many typical manner. By involving complex functions, you can make the differentiation and integration involved in the process of solving the problem more complicated also. But in my own understanding, it is the methodology, the methods which is more important. And that is what we have learned in our kinematics curriculum discussed so far, that from position to velocity to acceleration, the differentiation is required, and in the opposite direction, the integration is required. How constant of integration should be involved, should be computed, and how the tangent is related to the derivative, and how the area under the curve is related to the integration process. The things which we have learned will be very useful. However, in subsequent lecture, because we know that the real world is three-dimensional, so we have to now generalize from one dimension to two dimensions, and then from two dimensions to three dimensions to consider the phenomenon. And more phenomenon, more examples of one-dimensional kinematics motion can be discussed, but in a beginning, in a learning process, we have to restrict ourselves so that the lectures do not become very lengthy. So I have considered only a few examples, and you can learn more examples. And as you saw, because there are n number of books available which covers this topic of one-dimensional motion or one-dimensional kinematics, reference books are available. Each book has significant number of questions given in the end as numerical questions. Certain theoretical questions are also given which you tend to try to answer, and you would find that if you have attended all these lectures carefully, you would be able to answer those questions also. Now in the next talk, because before moving further, we must understand that how measurements are carried out. So we can't will be able to perform measurements in my presentation, and there are YouTube lectures available for making certain measurements using vernier calipers or screw gauge or other instruments. But I would be apprising you about the measurement process, then the involvement of the errors in the measurement. And measurement process I would explain by taking length as an example, and then error in measurement, and the notion of significant figure or concept of significant figures, because it is of importance to us in learning and understanding physics. So that I would try to be precise and concise in the next talk, so that I hope that I would be able to cover it one. But if I find that it takes 2 hours lecture, then I would divide it into 2. I am yet to design the slides for it, so I am not sure how much time it will take. So in the coming talks, I would be describing measurement, error in measurement and significant figure, and then taking up the kinematics in 2 dimensions. I hope you are liking my lectures. Please click the like button. You want to subscribe my channel, click the subscribe button, and by clicking the bell icon, you can ensure that you get notification every time a new lecture is uploaded. And thank you for being with me in this video lecture series. Let's hope that we will improve our understanding in coming lectures, and we will enjoy this journey together. Thank you very much for being with me.